Rain tapped the kitchen window of Michael's small flat in Sodermalm. While he laid plates on the birch table he had built long ago, the wood smooth from years of careful sanding and oil. He was 72, a retired carpenter with strong hands and a quiet manner, and he had cooked meatballs with cream sauce, boiled potatoes, and lingonberry jam because his son liked them when he was a boy. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked evenly, counting seconds like small nails set in a straight line. At 7, Daniel and his wife Clara hung their wet coats by the door and stepped into the warm light. They thanked him for dinner, and all three sat. At first they spoke about the weather, the late trains, the football scores. Then Daniel's voice rose a little. He began to talk about his father-in-law, the logistics boss, Eric Wallen. Eric always knows what to do, Daniel said, cutting his meatball like he was making a point in a meeting. Last month, there was a big shipping delay, and he solved it in 2 calls. That is real leadership. Clara nodded, pleased but careful, her eyes sliding to Michael as if to check the temperature in the room. Michael lifted his glass of water. He had spent winters on scaffolds and summers on roofs, kept customers happy through recessions, and paid for school books with overtime shifts. He did not brag. He chewed, swallowed, and listened. Daniel leaned back as if he already owned a corner office. Eric thinks big, he said. You get stuck in small jobs, Dad. The words were simple, but they landed like a hammer on a thin board. The room went quiet, except for the steady ticking in the hall and the soft hiss of the radiator. Michael set down his fork and looked around his own dining room. The shelves he had planed, the table he had joined, the frames he had hung straight with a level. And what? He asked, not loud, just clear. Daniel's face flushed. He pushed on. Face it, Dad, you will never measure up to my father-in-law. Clara's hand hovered above her glass, frozen between sip and set down. Michael stood, his chair legs scraping the floorboards he had laid with care. He felt no heat in his chest, only a hard, cool place where a decision waited. He walked to the window, watched the streetlight glow on wet cobblestones, then turned back. Will he pay your bills? He asked, voice calm. Because I'm not sending you any more money. The sentence hung in the air like a door that had just swung open. Daniel blinked and looked away, as if the wall might give him a script. Clara frowned, confused. What money? She said. We haven't received anything from you. The clock ticked louder in Michael's ears. Daniel's jaw shifted left and right, a habit from childhood when a lie would not fit through his teeth. The radiator hissed again. Outside, a bus sighed and pulled away. Inside, the room seemed to tilt just a little, as if a hidden weight had been set on the table. Clara turned to her husband. Daniel, she said softly, but there was steel under the softness. What is he talking about? Michael did not move. He had learned that a good joint holds when the glue sets by itself. He let the seconds pass. He watched his son's face cycle through bravado, surprise, worry. He remembered bank screens, transfer receipts, late-night calls that began with just until next month. He remembered telling himself it was help, not harm. He folded his hands behind the chair back and waited. The meatballs cooled. The candle made a shallow pool of light on the table. The mystery in the room was not about what had happened. Michael knew every number. The mystery was whether Daniel would speak and what would break first. The lie, the marriage, or the habit that had swallowed 3 years whole. Clara's eyes were on Daniel now, and the quiet pressed in from the hall. At last, Michael said only this. Tell her. Daniel's mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish pulled from dark water, while the radiator hissed and the clock ticked on. Then a thin voice came out of him, careful and practiced. Investments, he said, eyes on his plate. Short-term trading, just until the promotion settles. I was trying to build something for us. Clara turned her head slowly, as if a sudden movement might break the moment. What investments? She asked. Where? Since when do you trade? Daniel shifted in his chair, jaw working left and right the way it always did before a bad story. Different platforms, he muttered. Nothing risky. Michael did not sit. He stood with both hands on the chair back he had made when Daniel was a child and kept his voice even. Not trading, he said. Casinos, poker sites. Nothing risky is what you told me last month when I asked where the money had gone. The words landed like small stones dropped into a deep well. They took time to reach the bottom. Clara blinked, then fixed on Daniel again. How much? She asked. very quiet now. How much money from your father? Silence spread across the table. Outside, a bus sighed at the stop and moved on. Rain made a bright skin on the window. Michael answered because Daniel would not. About 800,000 kroner, he said, looking only at his son. Over 3 years. Transfers every month. More when there was an emergency. Car repairs, rent, a dental bill, a health insurance glitch. I kept the records. Clara's fork slipped, hit the plate, and rang like a small alarm. 800,000? She repeated, the number heavy in her mouth. While I took extra shifts and we cut food and we told the landlord we would catch up next month? Daniel pushed back his chair, palms out, a gesture that had saved him before. I had a system, he said. I could double it, maybe triple it. I was close. Michael shook his head once. If a system needs secret money, it is not a system. It is a hole. Clara stood, her face pale in the warm light. You lied to me for 3 years, she said, each word measured, and you let your father carry our life. Daniel reached for her sleeve. She stepped back. Where did it go? She asked again, not moving. Name it, all of it. Daniel's shoulders sagged as if the air had been taken out of him. Slots, cards, live tables on my phone, he whispered. At night, on lunch breaks. I thought I could fix everything fast, and you would never know. The room seemed to exhale. The mystery was not a clever trick now. It was a plain shape sitting in the middle of their dinner. Michael walked to the door and opened it. The corridor smelled of wet wool and old varnish, the familiar stairwell sound rising and falling. Not in my home, he said gently. You will not use my kitchen and my money to feed this thing. Clara took her coat from the peg with steady hands, then looked at Michael. I did not know, she said. I believe you, he answered. Daniel hovered between table and door, torn by habit and shock. Dad, please, just 1 more month. I can make it back. Michael met his eyes and did not look away. No more money, he said. If you want anything from me, ask for help getting well. Daniel's mouth trembled. So that's it? That is the line, Michael said. Clara stepped into the hall without another word. Daniel followed, half turning as if a different ending might still appear, but none came. Michael closed the door softly and stood very still, listening to the muffled tap of their footsteps on the stairs, the bus fading into rain, the clock knitting the seconds together. Then he cleared the cold plates, stacked them in the sink, and laid a folder of bank printouts on the table, the neat columns of Swedbank transfers running like rails toward a decision he would make in the morning. Morning came clear and cold, and Michael woke before the alarm. The folder of bank printouts still on the birch table where he had left it. He made coffee, checked each transfer again to be sure the numbers were not a dream, then took his old address book from the drawer and found a name he trusted. Advocat Maria Larsson, written in his late wife's careful hand, and he called at 8 when offices opened, asking for the first available time. By 10, he was on the green line to Hotorget with the folder in his bag, his ID in his wallet, and a small notebook for questions he did not yet know how to ask, the tram rattling steady while he counted stops to keep his thoughts from spinning. The law office sat in a glass building that looked over busy streets slick from last night's rain, and inside the reception smelled of paper and fresh coffee, the receptionist taking his name, checking her screen, and guiding him to a quiet room with a round table, a window, and 2 plain chairs. Maria entered with a thin smile and a legal pad, shook his hand, and asked him to tell the story from the start without skipping, so he did, simple and linear. How the first transfer was just until payday. How the pattern became monthly. How the emergencies grew bigger. How last night the truth finally walked into the room and would not walk out again. And when he was done, she asked one question in a calm voice. What outcome do you want for your son? And Michael surprised himself by answering at once. I want him alive and honest, and I want to stop feeding the thing that is killing him. Maria nodded, wrote a line on her pad, and explained that a Swedish will can carry conditions if they are clear and fair. Then laid out a plan like steps on a staircase. Name a certified gambling treatment program as the gate. Require 6 months of continuous care proven by official letters. Then require 12 months of documented abstinence with monthly reports from an approved counselor and clean bank records. And set a 5-year window from the time of Michael's death for Daniel to meet the terms. If Daniel completes the steps, he inherits as before. If he refuses or fails, the estate moves to a named recovery foundation in Stockholm that helps families with gambling harm. Michael listened, breathing easier because each step sounded like work and not a trick. And he asked about Clara, who had stood in his hall with steady hands and a pale face. And Maria said they could grant her a fixed sum no matter what Daniel chose, so innocence did not pay the price of his illness. They reviewed assets, the apartment, the savings, the small shares from his union days, the tools he kept in perfect order. And Maria wrote the structure in simple clauses, while a paralegal brought coffee and made copies of his ID. And then Maria read the draft aloud so nothing hid between words. The treatment, the year of proof, the 5-year window, the alternate beneficiary, the gift to Clara, the appointment of a neutral executor, the instruction to obtain Daniel's medical releases so verification could be done without games. Michael asked what would happen if Daniel tried to contest, and Maria explained that the documented transfers and the admission of gambling would support the design, and that a challenge would require Daniel to stand in daylight he had been avoiding. They set a signing for 2 days later with a notary and 2 witnesses, and Maria slid a checklist across the table. Bring passport, bring a current asset list, bring the names for executor and foundation. Then walked him to the lift and said, "This is a line, Mr. Anderson. Lines carry weight." Outside, the wind off Sergel's Torg lifted the edges of his coat, and he tucked the draft into his bag and rode the tram back to Södermalm with a quiet plan forming. Cook a simple dinner. Invite Daniel and Clara, speak plainly, and place the new will on the table like a door that was hard but open. Michael spent the afternoon moving in a straight line from task to task, steady hands giving shape to his plan. He scrubbed the birch table, ironed a clean cloth, set 3 plates and the good cutlery his wife once saved for birthdays, then cooked a simple meal: roast chicken, dill potatoes, a bowl of cool cucumber salad with vinegar and sugar, so there would be warmth on the table when the hard part began. At 6:30, he took the thick manila envelope from the sideboard and laid it on the low coffee table in the living room, its sealed flap facing the sofa, and he checked the clock, listened to its even tick, and opened a window to let in the soft evening air from the courtyard. At 7 sharp, the bell rang, and through the peephole he saw Daniel with supermarket flowers crushed in one fist, and Clara holding a bottle from System Bolaget. Both of them standing too straight like people entering an interview. He greeted them with calm words, took coats damp at the cuffs, and guided them to the kitchen, where steam fogged the window and the lamp made a pool of gold. They ate with care, speaking of small things: the tram delays, a neighbor's new baby, Clara's long shift. While underneath the talk, a quiet current pulled them toward the living room. When the plates were cleared, Michael poured coffee scented with cardamom and said, without drama, "Let's sit," then led them to the sofa and armchair and placed the envelope between them like a square stone on still water. Daniel's eyes stuck to it the way a man watches a door he hopes will open. And when Michael slid it across, Daniel tore the flap in one motion and began to read aloud in a thin voice, the formal Swedish turning sharp in the small room. 6 months in a certified gambling treatment program, 1 year of documented abstinence with monthly counselor reports, a 5-year window from the day of Michael's death to complete the steps. If completed, inheritance as before. If not, the estate to a Stockholm Recovery Foundation, a fixed gift to Clara regardless, the appointment of a neutral executor. Daniel's breath stuttered, the paper rattling between his fingers. He looked up with a face gone colorless. "This is punishment," he said, and the sentence sounded practiced, like an old excuse. Michael folded his hands and kept his voice even. "It is a condition," he answered, "a door that stays open if you walk the right way." Clara took the pages from Daniel and read them again silently, lips moving on the key lines, and when she lifted her eyes, they were wet but steady. "This protects us," she said, soft but clear. "It also gives you a path." Daniel flinched as if struck by a small, precise tool. "You're taking his side," he said to her, but the protest had no weight. "I'm taking your recovery," she replied, and set the papers down with care, aligning the corners as if order might help. The clock in the hall chimed 8, each tone widening the space between the 3 of them. Outside, a mope buzzed past and faded. Daniel stood so fast his cup rocked and left a dark ring on the table. "I can fix this without camps and counselors," he said, voice tightening. "Give me a stake. I'll show you." Michael shook his head once. "I will not fund the whole," he said. "I will stand beside the ladder." Daniel's shoulders dropped. For a moment he looked like the small boy who bent nails in the backyard and cried when they snapped, and Michael felt the ache of that memory pass through him and then settle. "I need time," Daniel whispered. "Take it," Michael said. "The line will still be here when you are ready." Clara rose, thanked Michael for dinner with a brief touch on his sleeve, and helped Daniel into his coat when his hands fumbled the sleeve. At the door, Daniel paused and asked without meeting his father's eyes, "Do you think I can do it?" Michael answered the way a builder answers a question about a cracked beam, by naming both risk and strength. "Yes," he said, "if you follow the plan and let others hold you to it." They left into the mild night. Their steps faded down the stairwell, and the apartment grew very quiet. Michael washed the 3 cups, wiped the ring from the table, returned the will to its envelope, and placed it back on the sideboard where the lamp's light pooled, the mystery now reduced to a single choice waiting in the dark. Whether Daniel would step through the door or keep circling the wall he had built himself. Spring pushed winter out of Stockholm slowly, and 4 weeks after the envelope on the coffee table, Michael received a short message from Daniel. "I checked in today. Talheden Behandling Center, outside the city. 6 months, residential." Michael read it twice at the birch table, then put on his coat and walked to the postbox to mail the signed copies Maria had asked for, each page flat and exact. The line they had drawn was now ink in more than one place. The days settled into a clear order. On Sundays, Michael rode the bus to the treatment center's visitor hour with a plastic box of cinnamon buns from the bakery on Hornsgatten, the security guard checking his name against a printed list, the air inside smelling of coffee and disinfectant. Daniel met him in a bright room with big windows and quiet rules. He looked thinner. He talked in simple reports, morning check-in, group sharing, lectures on the brain, urge surfing, writing triggers on cards, handing over his phone, sleep at 10. Michael did not argue or praise. He asked practical questions in a steady voice. "Who is your counselor?" A woman named Petra. "What happens when the idea of gambling arrives?" "Tell someone at once and wait it out." "What is your plan for the 7th week when routines start to feel heavy?" More meetings, a different task, a walk around the fenced path. He left each time at the posted hour, the bus windows fogging from warm breath and cold glass, his hands folded around a visitor badge he returned at the exit. Between visits, letters came to Michael's postbox. Thin envelopes with Talheden's stamp, each a monthly confirmation on cheap paper that still carried weight. Daniel attending. No gambling confirmed by random checks. Counseling sessions completed. Plan updated. Michael opened them at the kitchen counter, read them once, and filed them in a brown folder next to the will. Clara called on weekday nights from their small flat in Hagersten. She sounded tired but steady. She told Michael about the family sessions at the clinic, the hard hour when Daniel admitted the lies out loud, the easier hour when Petra explained enabling in plain words, the plan they wrote together on one page and taped to the inside of Clara's cupboard door. No money, no secrets. Daily check-ins, call the sponsor first, call Michael second, then call no one who will soften the rules. After 2 months, Daniel was allowed a short, supervised day in the city. He met Michael at a cafe near Slissen, sat with his back to the door as the program required, and ordered mineral water. He slid a folded paper across the table. A repayment plan, numbers small and honest, 500 kroner a month to start, then more when work returned, no promises he could not keep. Michael read, nodded once, and put the paper in his coat pocket without speech. The mystery here was not the math, but whether time would turn resolve into habit. In the 4th month, Talheden sent a different letter. Daniel had been given a role inside the center's workshop, sanding old chairs for a charity shop, learning to measure twice and cut once with tools he did not own. Michael stood at his own bench that evening, running sandpaper along a shelf edge and thinking of Daniel's hands learning a slow task that could not be sped up by luck. When Sunday came again, Daniel spoke in a new way. Less rush, more pauses. "I told the group about the will," he said. "I hated it first. Now I see it as a door. He looked at the floor and then up. I am afraid of week 20 when everyone relaxes and the brain says celebrate. Michael answered with the only plan he trusted. We will not celebrate. We will cook, walk, read the letter for that month, and do the next thing. As he left, Michael glanced back through the glass and saw Daniel sit with another man at a table covered in worksheets, two heads bent over a simple line drawn on paper, a road with marks for each day, the end not yet in view, but no longer hidden. Summer slid into late August, and Tal Heaton's 5th and 6th monthly reports arrived in Michael's postbox like clockwork, thin envelopes with careful stamps that confirmed attendance, clean checks, and counselor notes signed by Petra. He opened them at the kitchen counter, read each line once, then filed them in the brown folder beside the will, the papers stacking into a quiet record of work done. On family day at the clinic, he sat in a bright room while Petra outlined Daniel's exit plan on a whiteboard in simple steps. Hand back the phone filters and replace them with stricter locks. Register for 3 Gamblers Anonymous meetings a week in the city. Give Clara full view of bank accounts. Choose a job with no access to cash or online terminals. Call the sponsor first when the urge comes. Daniel listened with a pen in hand and wrote each step on a small card he kept in his wallet. Discharge came in early September. Michael took the bus to meet him at the gate, the guard checking names against the list as always, and together they rode the tunnelbana back to Södermalm, changing lines at Slussen, the carriage warm and the windows fogged at the edges. They did not celebrate. They ate soup in Michael's kitchen, called Clara, and then walked to a small community hall where Daniel signed his name on a sheet outside a meeting room with a pot of coffee and a box of plain biscuits. This is the first thing, Daniel said to no one in particular and took a seat near the door. The first week home was a set of small moves made on purpose. Daniel and Clara carried boxes down the stairs to a smaller flat in Hagerston and handed the car keys to a buyer who counted bills twice and left. Clara put a printed budget on the fridge and kept the bank app open when they paid for groceries. Daniel took a trial position at a charity workshop in Årsta, where old chairs waited for sanding and glue, the foreman Leif showing him how to clamp a joint and walk away while the glue set. Each night, Daniel sent a short message. Meeting done, craving low, plan for tomorrow. Each Sunday, he and Michael cooked meatballs or fish, walked along Tanto, and read the clinic letter for that month together, then placed it in the folder. In late October, a test came the way Petra had promised tests arrive, plain and sudden. A loud slot machine ad flashed on a kiosk screen by the metro entrance. Daniel's chest went tight, fingers prickled, breath shortened. He stopped, looked at the card in his wallet, and called his sponsor, Jonas, then called Michael. They sat on a bench near the water, while the feeling peaked and fell like a wave. Now you go home, Michael said. Eat, sleep, and go to your meeting. Daniel nodded and did exactly that. November brought hard weather and steadier days. Daniel's repayment plan began. 500 kroner on the first of the month, a line in Michael's bank log labeled first step, then second, with a short note from Daniel each time. December's letter from Petra confirmed 3 months post-discharge with no gambling and regular attendance. Maria Larsson emailed to remind Michael how to store the certificates and when to request the counselor's annual summary, her message short and clear. In January, Daniel moved from the charity workshop to a small furniture restorer Leif knew, sanding drawer fronts and learning to match stain. He sent photos of his hands at work, a quiet proof more convincing than speeches. Spring came again. On the 12th monthly report after discharge, the clinic's stamp and Petra's signature confirmed 1 full year of abstinence with documentation. Michael placed the letter on top of the stack, closed the folder, and stood for a moment with his palm flat on the cover. He did not change the will. He did not tear it up. It continued to sit behind old accounting binders like a straight beam in a house, carrying weight without noise. That evening, Daniel and Clara came for dinner with a simple cake from the bakery on Hornsgatan. They ate, stacked plates, and walked to the water. No one said the word safe. The mystery had not vanished. It had changed shape. It now lived in the space between one good day and the next, in the small acts that held a line. A meeting attended, a budget kept, a chair clamped and left alone until the glue was ready. The clock in the hall ticked evenly, and Michael listened to its steady sound and thought, this is how a house stands, by pieces fitted true, by time, and by hands that do the next right thing.